Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for being on time for what I think is going to be a really cool webinar. If you look at your screen, you'll see we've got from silos to synergy. And this has been a popular topic. We've got several hundred of you signed up. And I think it's because it's a frustration that it's never really the absolute priority for us to focus on, but it is most definitely an underlying chronic disease that we all suffer from, have always suffered from, and perhaps even continue to be suffering from even more than we've done in the past. But rest assured, there are answers, there are ways forward, there are possibilities, and we're here to discuss some of them today. And as you can see from the little tagline underneath the title here, we're also going to have a little bit of a focus on how technology might be a way forward here, how we integrate teams and improve operations going forward. Now, the good news is that we're joined by some absolutely fantastic people that are going to be explaining this. And what you'll see when I introduce them in a second is that we've deliberately got somebody with commercial leadership, someone from medical leadership, someone from technology leadership, and finally, someone from general leadership. And my hope, my dream is that by having that scenario, we can obviously talk about, in particular, the medical commercial silo, which has plagued us and continues to plague us, despite the fact that customers themselves don't necessarily see that division and don't want to see that division. So, is it personality types? Is it data? Is it the existing structures? We'll have a look at why we have those silos in place today, because sometimes silos are good. Sometimes we need that focus. But increasingly, I think that the future that we all hope for, the AI-driven, customer-driven, technology-driven future requires that collaboration, requires those seamless connections and those reductions in the gaps between departments. Let's get on to those introductions that I promised then. So first, we've got Carsten. Carsten has become someone I have come to admire a lot over the last couple of years since he was introduced to me. He's the head of medical digital innovation at AstraZeneca, and in my opinion, has one of the boldest but also smartest visions for where we can go as medical affairs departments in the near future. And I'm really hoping we get to hear a little bit more of that today. Stefan, it's absolute pleasure. Sorry, Carsten, absolute pleasure having you here today. Evie has been an industry leader from the technology side of the business with stints at Appian, of course, and previously ServiceNow, and is someone a lot of us look up to for understanding what the role of technology has been, is today, and of course will be in the near future. He's known as an industry expert and innovator, and in my opinion, is driving this conversation forward on multiple dimensions. Also want to say a thank you to his team at Appian. I don't know if you're familiar with Appian, but you most certainly should be. They've been a fantastic partner in making sure today's webinar happens. Deb is a friend who I got to know also a couple of years ago, and seems to be incredibly well respected at GSK, I'm sure for very good reasons. She's had a minor blip with her current project recently, no fault of her own, of course, but in general has been an international, very international commercial leader over the past few years, and has spent 15 years actually at GSK across different regions and therapies, and is a pioneer on several of the assignments that she's worked on. Deb, I'm really pleased that you can join us today. And Stefan is someone who I got to know back when he was at Takeda. He then became CEO of a biotech called George Medicine, based near me in London, and is now CEO at Merck Therapeutics, which of course is a pioneer on some very interesting therapy areas indeed. He's got 20 years of experience across different brands, also at Novartis, and he's led global clinical stage companies, as I just mentioned, as well as drug development and business development initiatives. And in my opinion, is a great integrator, someone who is admired by different business units for his ability to do so. So thank you again so much, guys, for being a part of this. Okay, you might remember that when you signed up, I already asked you a question. That question was as follows, and I'm going to show you the answers as well. What is the greatest challenge your organization faces in breaking down silos between different functional areas? And here are the results. So you can say only 10% of people said we do not face these kind of challenges, whereas a third of people said resistance to change and established ways of working, and different priorities taking just over a quarter of the vote as well. But overall, a relatively varied and even-ish spread of different reasons as to what those challenges might be. And then I asked one more question to you as well, which was this one. If forced to choose just one, which approach do you find most effective for promoting cross-functional collaboration in your organization? And I gave you a few different options there. Have a look at the answers. Again, it's quite an even spread, but the winner most definitely designing backwards from the customer or patient experience. That's the light gray in the bottom right corner as being the biggest answer. And external change management led is actually the smallest. Technology efforts just slightly higher than that. So interesting results. We're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about more stuff in just a second. But before you relax, before you take another sip of your coffee, I need you to do one more thing for me, which is to answer an additional question. That's right. We are not making today's session a relaxing one. We need you to take full part in this. So if you look at your screen, you'll see a question. Why do silos persist? Very simple question, not necessarily a simple answer. I've come up with a few answers there. You'll also see a second question underneath. How do you perceive the relationship with digital transformation, which of course everyone is going through, and organizational culture? So that question, I think, might also give us another perspective on this problem as well. So have a look at those. I'll close that in a few seconds. When you've answered, I'd like you to go to the chat window and introduce yourself. Please say hello if you haven't done already. I can see a few people already have. Tell us where you're calling in from, and make sure that little blue drop-down box is set to everyone instead of just to me, which is very nice for me, but not useful for everyone else. Okay, I'll get rid of my slides, and I'm going to ask my beautiful panel to turn on their cameras and join me. And thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to see your smiling faces. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. And I'm going to hold this poll open just 5 more seconds. I can see that about 3/4 of you have done it so far. So 5 seconds for the rest of you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everyone. Good to see everyone still awake. Let's have a look at the results, shall we? And that will provide a little, hopefully a little interesting note for us to start today's conversation on. So can you see the results? Can someone? Zoom's got a bit slow over the summer, I have to admit, and it's taking a while to respond. So can you see that? I'll take that as a yes. In your experience, what's the most common contributing factor? So it's not legacy IT systems and data pools. That's interesting. It's very much a third of you saying departmental KPIs, objectives, and leaders. So very much within our own hands, I think you could say. And then how do you perceive the relationship with digital transformation? Cultural change is a prerequisite for successful digital transformation. So the culture comes first. It eats strategy for breakfast, clearly, with nearly half of people saying that. Poll showed and then went away. Interesting. I hope others can see it. Panel, do feel free to unmute yourselves at this point and let me know what you think. I would love to start with just where you see the challenge of silos, your perspective on why silos persist. You might want to refer to the poll that you've just seen, and just kind of how much of a problem it really is for you would be really good to hear. So Debbie, you kindly unmuted yourself, which means, of course, you have to go first.
Fantastic. Hi, and Paul, thank you again for inviting me in the lovely introduction. I think it's interesting as I look across the answers to the polls, it seems to me that it comes down to 2 issues. I think one is how well do we understand and respect each other's roles? So the human, personal, cultural connections conversation that, I think if it goes right is how we unlock things, and actually where you see significant divides or significant differences is where you feel like you just completely misunderstand or misalign. And I don't think that's just medical commercial. I think that happens between commercial and R&D. I think that happens between very specific functions where you come from just such fundamentally different places, and therefore you may be talking with what sounds like the same words, but ultimately is completely different languages. And so I see that happen consistently and regularly in my experience. I think the other thing is, and there's a lot of that in the poll around misalignment of priorities, misalignment of objectives. And it was interesting, if you look at the first question, actually the solve for this comes down to customer back, patient back thinking, where you sit down around a table and say, ultimately, what am I trying to do here for my business, for the community that I serve, which is the patient and the customer. And if you can have that conversation, in my experience, you can move mountains together. It's where you don't have that alignment of the bigger purpose and the objective where I think we get lost and we get misalignment. So that's how I've seen it play out, and that's my starting position. Interested.
Do you think that that cliche of commercial departments not wanting to engage with medical and just seeing beyond the sort of personality differences has disappeared? Do you think that still persists and that's still a major factor?
I mean, not in my teams. I would hope not.
Now we're getting the truth.
Genuinely though, I think if commercial can't respect and understand the unique and important role that our medical partners play, I think that they're in the wrong industry. We are here to develop medicines for patients and customers, and you need the unique skill sets that the two organizations, parts of the organization can play in bringing these data and these products to patients. So in my opinion, I think it may happen. I think that that's a really outdated way of working.
Good. Well, I'm glad we're moving beyond that. Carsten, I think we have to get I don't want to say the opposite side of the coin, because I want to respect what Deb just said, the same but slightly differently colored side of the coin that medical represents. Please give us your perspective.
So very much, and it's really interesting to hear Deborah as well. Very much where I come from and on this is you have to work cross-functionally. That there is no other choice, whether it's the pharmaceutical industry or any other industry outside of this. For us, within a healthcare organization, though, we have to anchor on the patient pathway, those point of care decisions, not on function. And I think that's what we will keep coming back to through all the way through this webinar. And really, I think it's also, I want to give us all a little bit of allowance as well, where we pull this at the door of a pharmaceutical industry, because that's what we know. But change is hard. The top poll answer was resistance to change and understanding other people's priorities, right? It's a human thing. And you see this in terms of the need for cross-functional working, for how functional siloing has happened. You see this across industries, and collaboration is absolutely necessary to navigate future trends. And I think what we all feel within a healthcare organization and the acceleration of science is that it's very easy to functional silo because of speed and because of complexity. And I'm sure we're going to hear more around this from Evie. It's hard to find ways to collaborate. It's possible, but you have to work hard at finding ways to navigate in the complexity and the speed at which we're working.
Let's move on to Stefan for now, and we'll come back to you, Carsten. I think that was very well done for drawing the line in the sand. I hope there aren't too many detractors from what you said. I'd be very interested if there are. But let's hear from Stefan, and then we'll get onto the practicalities. Stefan.
Oh, thank you, Paul. And first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of the panel and just listening into the polls and into the different opinions. And I have to say, first, I've observed these silos from multiple different perspectives. I've led global therapeutic area teams and program teams, where I was working as a commercial person with a commercial background, entrenched in an R&D organization. I've seen this in small and mid-sized companies as a CEO, where I was trying to align departmental goals and ensuring that there's actually a true cross-functional way of working that's happening. So I think the problem is pretty apparent, but it helps sometimes to know you take different viewpoints and different angles on that. From my vantage point, I don't think it's necessarily a misalignment on the objectives. I think everybody aligns that we are all in this game for developing the best medicine for patients, and we're trying to best meet the patient and the practitioner's goals. Then the question, of course, that's under the surface, and everybody aligns to that. You will speak to all, executive leaders in your organization. They will all say that's exactly the goal. And then the question is, how do you do that best? And I think this is where then people start to differ a little bit, and this is where cultural differences, and I don't mean the typical cultural differences between nations or countries or genders or whatever. I mean cultural differences in functions really come into play. And this is something interesting because in a way, as a CEO, I have to say is desired, because I want a scientist to work in a very scientific way, and I want a commercial person to work in a very commercial way. But I also wish for these persons, and this is back to Deb's point about, it would be probably the wrong industry. We are in a position that people don't really understand what the other part is doing. We are in a position in pharma to hire very smart people and really gauge that interfunctional understanding. But it's something that leaders need to forge. It's something that leaders really need to engage with, and that proximity, from my viewpoint, that proximity to other departments and the constant exposure to other areas thinking and trains of thought will eventually make people really understand how this area ticks, how that area ticks, and how below that high-level goal, there's a great alignment on these game plans. And I don't want to go yet into solutions. I know you're going to get us there, but I truly think it's more a cultural difference between departmental leaders below a surface of a general alignment on what the company goals are. And I'll tell you a little bit what I do as a CEO later on in order to ensure that the cooking recipes is aligned between the cultural interdependencies in the different leaders as well.
The strange feeling I'm getting while talking to you all, the sort of almost subtext behind you, is is this a bit of an excuse that we're sort of still falling back on for not perhaps being as advanced as we could be as organizations and as collaborative as we could be? I'll leave that for the moment because I do want to hear from Evie and to hear from his angle as someone who's been a technology pioneer.
So I think bottom line, it really comes down to we're very tribal animals. That you're not going to be able to take that away. We are creatures of habit. You just have to observe how people come back into a room after having been there for an hour in a meeting, taking a break, and people are basically going back to the same seat they were in an hour ago. And then if you're going to have that meeting for a couple of days, there's not a lot of change. People just go back to that same seat. So we're very, very used to and comfortable with if things don't change too much. Change is challenging for us. I think in that regard, you also have to look at what's the history here as far as how did we even get here, right? So we used to have commercial teams. We called them sales. And those sales teams 10, 15 years ago pretty much spelled out for themselves how they were going to pitch the product. And then the regulators came in and told us, wait a second, no, this is not appropriate. We need to have some more control over this. And that's when we started creating this medical group that started advising sales. Advising it may be a soft word. There was actually a lot of pressure and governance that was coming from the medical group. So obviously now as humans, now you have a tribe of salespeople and a tribe of medical folks. And for many organizations, if you don't foster, like Deb mentioned here, the connection that ties between those teams, you're not going to be able to bridge that gap. There's still the feeling of, you're coming on top of me or behind or looking over my shoulder to actually get what I need to get done. And I have a job to actually sell the organization, sell our products, speak and to, train our physicians. But yet I keep on getting banged on the head as far as, no, it's supposed to be this way, that way. and you're harming how I'm getting my job done. So then the question is there also a way to bridge this? And are there any technologies that can allow you to actually break some of those silos? And we'll get to that in a minute, but I think it does come down to, first, the cultural change, acknowledging the fact that that's just human behavior and how we do. How do you provide leadership that can actually bring us together? And how you support that with technology that actually doesn't foster the continuation of this tribalism and the information is power, so I'm going to hold it and I'm not going to share it. And also, don't tell me how to do my job. I'm very well at doing it. So I think, from that perspective, there's, we're unpacking a lot here. So thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd love to hear if there's any more comment on that. And at the same time, I guess I'm going to go to the audience and just also see what they think is, you'll see a new poll arrive on your screen in a second, and you're going to want to tick every single box. But I'm evil, in case none of you knew that already, and I'm only allowing you to choose one. And so it's called Making It Happen. Which type of mindset or approach do you find most effectively enables? And I know that you can't do just one. I know that. But I'm forcing you to choose the one that you think is most effective. So I'll leave you a couple of minutes to do that question. In the meantime, I want to move our conversation, and Evie will get to some slides from you in a second, but let's move from where we are talking about the challenge and the reasons for persisting and move towards actions that we need to take. And I guess I'm quite interested in hearing from Deb, Carsten, and Evie. If you were CEO for the day, what's the action that you would take to try and make this better for the organization rather than just for where you're sitting right now? So whoever wants to go first on that, please do. You can all tell Stefan how to do his job better. I'm sure he'd really appreciate that.
I can jump in real quick, and there are examples of that where that was actually done quite well. Ed Catmull, who was the CEO for Pixar for many years, and little known fact is that Steve Jobs actually worked at Pixar for 20 years. It wasn't just Apple that he put together, and in that, he actually wrote a book called Creativity Inc. Very, very worthwhile read. But he was able to establish and create that culture of not just where we evaluate and audit each other, but actually a culture where we are all standing back to back and we're in a team and we're facing the rest of the world, right? And in that context, that and everybody has a responsibility for everybody else on the team. I'm not going to go much into detail, but pick up that book, Creativity Inc. Tremendous lessons as far as how to create an open culture of accountability, but also of accountability to each other.
Deb, Carsten.
Maybe I'll go. And I've been reading. I'm multitasking. I'm reading the chat, and there's some really interesting chat going on the side. And someone, and I think it builds on your point, Evie. Someone had a really nice comment around, actually, how do you make the team become the team that is responsible for delivering the outcome, the SWAT team on the launch, the team that drives the business in a country, and actually, really working to break down the kind of reporting lines that go up, the functional expertise, so that what becomes the number one priority team is the asset team. In my case, as I sit in global commercial strategy, like how do you circle around the work to be done or the project to be delivered, rather than allow your functional stream and functional reporting line to trump and be the priority. So I think there's something in that. I think there's something in this kind of SWAT team of diverse experts and specialists that allows you and forces you to kind of go beyond your functional accountabilities and making that your winning factor. So I think I would start there. I like the conversation around that. But Carsten, I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
I think, and I'd agree with both Deborah and Evie here, but I would want to, if I was CEO, to answer Paul's question directly, if I was CEO for the day, I would want everybody to elevate the conversation and actually really address the problem that we all face. We are all, either in terms of in a position of responsibility, being part of healthcare organizations that are trying to affect change, positive change, and health equity across healthcare ecosystems. Yet the burden of disease, and we also see this in our day-to-day work, grows absolutely unabated, where we see functional siloing within healthcare systems that we work with, which causes everything from healthcare inefficiency, discontinuous and fragmented care, treating too late, unsure of what works. That's the problem. That's the problem that we all have a responsibility in solving, and we have to get our house in order. So what we see externally, we can help. And that we can help co-solve with healthcare organizations. So if I was CEO for the day, I would want, and I see it in the chat as well, the differences between individual, team, or functional responsibilities. And as I said, we all have a responsibility as part of a healthcare organization to affect change and increase healthcare resilience.
So, Carsten, just playing devil's advocate, what you're effectively saying, therefore, is that currently leadership ambitions are either not bold or not clear enough for us to be able to get behind the sorts of things that you're saying, or maybe just not specific enough. That's something that I believe, by the way, just to sort of put my, throw my gauntlet down. I believe that, the slogans we have on our companies are far too vague and far too uninspiring and far too directionless for us to be able to, do what that famous janitor in the NASA office said when asked what he was doing his job, saying, "I'm getting a man on the moon." We've got so many KPIs, we've got so much confusion, and partly maybe we've just got too many products, but interested to hear your response to that.
So I think simply the answer is yes. There is more to support externally and more that we can do than we actually have the capacity to do, let alone about arguing who does it. So I think perhaps in terms of the leadership, perhaps that leadership point aside, responsibility that we all talked to earlier comes with clarity, and it comes with a functional clarity. So that there are things and differences between roles, as you opened with, for a reason. But are people clear on that? That in number one, that we might have an issue to solve in a healthcare system, which is either at a policy, at a regional, or at a hospital level. There are different roles that will need to, and at different levels within that healthcare system, that need to address that. So, and I think there's definitely a need for coordination around that. There's a need for very clear responsibilities to bring the clarity and the coordination behind it, to address some of those things that we saw originally in the poll around resistance to change and understanding priorities. That was the second thing that everybody flagged, was understanding one another's priorities. If that's not role clarity, then I don't know what is.
Well, I'd love to hear Evie and then, of course, Stefan. Now that we have all told you how to do your job, Stefan, I'd love to hear your response. And at the same time, I'm going to end the poll and share the results of that. So
I'll tell you first that from my perspective, we have to remember these are not excuses; these are facts. There are probably 6 times more humans on the planet today than there were 20 years ago. We are extending our human touch, or we expand into areas that we haven't been before. So we're going to get exposed to more diseases that we've seen or unseen before. And we are now also looking to solve more complex problems, right? So this is no longer the penicillin. We're now talking about MABs and modifying, genetics of various different capabilities. So it's much more sophisticated, and it requires also a stronger complexity as far as how we interact. And that then creates a lot of pressure on the organizations that we're working in. And that requires additional attention, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what making it happen actually provides as a result. And I see it's building cross-functional project teams. I agree that that is the way to do that, but I think the top-down mandates, and it's not so much mandates, lead by example. That's all. The leadership does give the organization a sense of how they collaborate and how then we should collaborate. We're just human, and we are basically apes, and we copy each other. So that's how we work. So be careful in how you lead.
Well, I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn from Stefan about the various collaborations and gatherings that he's been able to effect. So Stefan, let's hear from you. And we've all been talking about it.
Thanks, Paul. Look, I mean, I think there's one recurring theme, which is everybody recognizes that these walls between departments and areas are really thick. So if you can't break them down, you need to connect the people that actually work on a solution or unite them in a purpose. And in fact, I was just last week, I was gathering my extended leadership team in a European city, and I ended pretty much the conversation by saying, look, we need to act as one team. We need to act as one team for the benefit of the patient, for the solution that we're trying to create, and for the products that we invent. I think this is equally true for a pharmaceutical business, but it's also true when you look into the different challenges that we face when we're out there in the healthcare market, try to connect different stakeholders around an account, for example, around a hospital, around a patient group. I think we as industry, and I've had the pleasure at Takeda Pharmaceuticals, for example, to lead an asset team at the time point when the product was about to be launched, and move that asset team from an R&D-led team to a commercially led team. That was at the time of launch. I'm talking, probably a decade ago. And I think the industry has learned from that example of saying, look, first of all, it's a great idea to have an asset team. I know Deb has probably a lot of experience with working asset teams as well, because it connects people. But then I think people learned that it needs to happen at the right time. Maybe at launch is not exactly the right moment, but you need to go much, much earlier. So the industry has learned from that and gotten better. And there's early asset teams now that incorporate cross-functional perspectives, and they may actually be leadership of that asset team, totally independent from any given function. And even as soon as a program hits the clinic, now these asset teams are formed. So I think best practice has evolved, luckily, over time. But I think what is fundamentally still important for me as a leader, and this is to your point and to your question, what would you do if you were CEO one day? What I'm trying to do every year when we build the company objectives, I unite my executive leadership team for a day, face to face, and we don't leave the room if we haven't fully vetted the overall company goals, and then derived from the company goals the individual functional goals, and every leader has seen them and everybody has signed up on the different functional goals. So we have actually sign up of maybe 10, 12, 13 people of their mutual goals, and then these roles get further cascaded. And that ensures, as I said, that not only the high-level goal is well understood, but there's also a pathway, almost like a cooking recipe, that's understood. And then you can start connecting the individuals. And again, this is not to say that everything here flows super nicely and perfectly well, but it's at least a start to start with the objectives, then connect the leaders, and then connect the people in a grassroots type effort. And I think it's a recognition that we as an industry, we are on a path. We have seen that over the years, how our approach to interfunctional collaboration and interfunctional work has truly evolved. And I would like to see that taken out. And again, I'm coming from the perspective of a pharmaceutical company. This is where I've grown up. That is my role also on this panel today. And I would like to see this approach taken out to customers, to accounts, and beyond our industry, the same sort of best practice.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for sharing everything you shared so far. So what's interesting is that technology has not organically come very heavily to the fore in the polls and the conversation so far. Evie, you are a technologist. I would like you to make the case. I mean, assuming that's what you want to do, I don't know. But I would love you to make the case, maybe share a few slides about what you think we can do using technology to advance this question? Because I think that people need to know.
We'll jump in real quick, and I will take probably 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, and that way we can leave some time for additional discussion and Q&A. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen here. And okay, so it was interesting, right? The first poll that you put forward, technology actually ranked pretty much, I think, the lowest. I think it's in the way that we asked the question. Because let me just take you here for a second. If you look at these common business challenges, I hear them all the time. My colleagues hear them all the time. These are parts of our regular discussions when we talk to teams in medical affairs, in commercial, on the regulatory side, in manufacturing, across the board. I mean, so it strikes me odd that that question resulted in okay, well, technology is very low in its impact here because disparate data and disconnected technology. I think many people can say, yes, that's part of what we see. Poor user experience. Yes, I think part of the challenge for us is into the future, how are we going to hold talent if the experience they get here is you need to open 10 screens to actually get your job done. Then you need to go into Excel and do some other work. You go into SharePoint, use some email for some of the communications. Then you go to a meeting, you look at somebody else's spreadsheet, you leave the meeting, you're back with your own spreadsheet. Like, wait a second. And by the way, we also use fax in this industry. My daughter doesn't know what a fax looks like. So high manual efforts, operational inefficiencies, long cycle times, all these items that are listed here are still problems. Well, these are, of course, as we spoke here, cultural in nature, but they're technology oriented as well. Because if we have a technology that can actually bust some of those silos, fix some of these business challenges, I think that the culture then will also change with that, right? You can't separate the two. You have to work on both at the same time. And it comes down to, for example, in pharma, we see R&D, medical, and commercial with clear siloed walls between those. Yes, the folks in medical work with their own systems and their own data, and the folks in commercial work with their own systems and data. Sometimes there's some flow of information across this divide, but for the most part, it might happen in meetings, but not via technology. And then the value proposition would be, well, can we look at providing a capability where I connect the process of the work that we need to do with underneath it, the complexity of the various different databases, people, et cetera, that we need to connect to, and bring a process-oriented approach so that you don't need to open 10 different screens on your laptop or on your iPad to actually get things done, but rather there's a flow to the work, and the system is able to guide you along in the context of the work that you need to get done. It floats to me the information I need in order to make decisions right now. It floats to me information that I need in order to take action, and then lightly guides me into my next stage. That would be a tremendous place where we have people, data, and systems really working and orchestrating together. And, can that be done? Yes, it is definitely possible to bring together SAP, which is a siloed system on its own, with an Oracle database that you might use for capturing PV data, with Viva, which might be used for either your CTMS or quality management or your PromoMats, promotional material management, with Salesforce that helps you and guides you towards some of the work that you need to do to connect to your HCPs, et cetera. And then you, of course, can include in there Cvent for managing event. I mean, we still use a lot of these systems. And previously, that identification that technology is not the problem. Well, technology actually is part of the problem because it simply exacerbates the way that our culture exists. So you need to focus really strongly on being able to try and break those silos. And that has to come through some automation. And you can look at systems that support task automation on the bottom left here. And then you can go further up to the right in your complexity of how you handle process automation all the way through to orchestration across systems and functions. And finally, the place we would like to get to is business operations and creation and reinvention of all the process. So continuous improvement as we move forward, and we're always continuing to connect. And the question is, how do we do that today with robotic process automation, AI getting mixed in now, intelligent document processing, so the ability to actually capture various different documents that we need to put together, and maybe AI can help me draft the first draft, and then I go and work on it and evaluate it. But that has to happen not as an experiment, but as part of the process and the workflow that we do. You need to mix in some business rules, additional smart services, and of course, integrations to all your systems. And hopefully, in the context of the systems underneath that we already use, whether it's Salesforce or Viva or other things, remain the systems of record, but I now can create and connect them with some orchestration above that helps the teams that are currently working in each other, not together in seeing the same data, but now we're going to allow them to actually see all the information. You get to see the information that the medical affairs folks see. Medical affairs get to see the information that sales sees. And we are now part of a process, a continuous way in which we actually work. And I think with that, I'll pause here for us to go into some additional questions, but it really comes down to, can I connect people with robotic process automation, with AI in the context of the process, with API connectors to the various different systems? And can I also do so in a way that allows me to now look at the process itself, continuously improve it through process mining, through the capabilities of discovering, improving processes? Where are some bottlenecks? Where are either people or processes or data flowing backwards to get reworked again? And we see that a lot. And now we can get to achieve a really better implementation of how we leverage technology to support the fact that we are somewhat segregated. And what we heard before, yes, the problem is we are segregated. Technology can help. It's not the solution. You have to work on the cultural aspect of things. You have to connect people. You have to allow them to connect beyond just the system. And AI is not going to solve all the problems, but it could be part of the solution for how we work, and we need to integrate that into the way we work. I'll pause here, Paul, and give it back to you, and hopefully we get some discussions.
Thank you. I was listening to you, Evie, at the same time as reading a lot of comments, and I really appreciate everything you've just said. A lot of people making the case for technology, of course, being a mere enabler. I think, and I'm going to stick my neck out here a little bit and say that I think that we don't know what we don't know in our industry. And I think that the reason why technology is considered just an enabler is because nobody has seen the powerful effects or been in the maelstrom of that powerful effect of what technology does when it does turn an entire industry upside down, as we have seen it do in multiple, particularly consumer-oriented industries. And I think that we have been insulated, and I think we are complacent about what technology could do if we allowed it to do that, or if we were open to it. And I'm continually fascinated, Evie, by the stuff that you're saying, and by the fact that technology allows platform business models to exist, which could not exist offline. Can anyone imagine Facebook or Google or Snapchat or whatever offline? It simply doesn't work. Technology has been a transformer, not just an enabler in those areas. Yes, it's had some unpleasant consequences as well. We all know about that. But we're not going back to how we were before. So I don't know. I'd like to hear from others. Evie, I don't know if you support my
strongly support
build upon what you said. But,
strongly support. Yes, I completely agree. Yes.
I was thinking, Evie, as you were talking, is I think on a human level, I see a path forwards for us breaking down our silos. But if I just look at my organization and I think about technology and our data processes and how our data stacks are built and how things talk to each other, actually right now I see that as a major barrier and a major issue to us unlocking it and figuring out the problems of silo working and silo thinking. Like if I could start this organization from scratch and build a data stack, build a set of data that talks to each other, that leverage, we buy the same data in multiple different departments and code it differently, and never shall the three meet, just because of the size of the organization that we're in. And I do think that it's interesting and interesting as well. We have got so much data. If you think about what kind of data a pharmaceutical industry holds, actually, if you could put that in a melting pot and allow it to actually talk, can you imagine? Like, just imagine what we could do if we started by building from this principle of asset back and kind of one team. I think you could do some amazing work. I'm not sure I know the pathway to rebuilding though, and I think that's one of the areas that I get stuck on. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts. You must see this in your job all the time. I'm not sure I know the way forwards.
Yeah, certainly, right? I mean, so and that's where it's interesting, right? Because any individual human has a challenge in looking at a lot of data, right? I mean, we're very good if we can look at a spreadsheet, but then when it's a spreadsheet of 30,000 lines, okay, now we start getting really lost. However, AI can do that. And that's really interesting because artificial intelligence specifically has the ability to look at a large amount of data and actually comprehend it. We can't. However, it's important to apply that in the right places, and your data then needs to actually be designed so that it can be comprehended. Because otherwise, if it's actually disparate and really not connected, doesn't make sense, then AI will just make wrong determinations, and we know what happens then. So a big part of it is, can you at least do some hygiene of some of your data to start building those areas where you can leverage AI to start comprehending those, we call it, data lake. I mean, fine, data lake is usually very huge. You can parse that into different pieces, start applying AI to it, have human in the loop. We must have the human in the loop as we actually look at that. And then we can start growing from that. And we can actually work towards a future whereby as you said, if you redesigned it, I know what it should look like. Fine. The problem is we cannot just have traffic stop and then do the road work and then everybody can drive again in a couple of months. It's not going to happen. We need to be able to continuously work on this while we're still, delivering and providing new medicine to patients and creating access to patients. So there has to be a way where you can leverage technology in that process to bridge where we are today to where we want to be. I think we can, and part of it is not just experimenting with AI, but actually putting it into process in a thoughtful way, doing the appropriate verification and validation and verification and testing and assessment, and thoughtfully moving forward with that. So yeah, I mean and I see a very bright future from that perspective. I think we can.
Okay. Guys, I'm afraid we're going to have to hurry up. There are only 9 minutes left in this webinar. Time flies when you're having fun. Some of you will have noticed I've launched a new poll question in the background, obviously on this topic. I do want to hear from Carsten and Stefan on this, but relatively short and sharp answers, if that's all right, gentlemen. Carsten.
So I agree, but first of all, Deborah, thank you. I love the very openness in terms of presenting and what most organizations feel as well, in terms of how do I get to that endpoint. And it's like the earth is curved, that you can see how we're operating in swim lanes, which is the whole purpose of this call, to how we will be operating in the future in terms of it's not hardwired decision making, it's decision making in data. It's cloud-based data that we're operating, not even with Evie's data lakes. It goes further than that. But the Earth is curved, and most won't be able to connect the two. So what's the iterative change that you can make behind it in terms of the simple next steps to address some of those organizational barriers that everybody's commented on? The other thing is, I think it's worthwhile saying for everybody that digital tools have enabled and do enable collaboration, but they also create workload challenges if not deployed correctly. And I think that informal collaboration, we all have to work very hard at in order to keep that going, in order to break down some of those functional silos as well. So with most of the comments in the chat, I don't think tech is the only answer here.
Okay. The results of the poll are up, and you can see that there is a positive answer to question number 2 on the list. Vital is 2/5 of the answer, and I'll let you read the others. But Stefan, over to you.
Really quickly, because I'm probably not the best person to speak on tech and on AI, but I think oftentimes we design solutions around programs and areas that are set up, and we don't oftentimes take enough opportunity to take a step back, start with a white sheet of paper and design the data landscape and the solution provided that we really need in order to support what we desire for. So that's what I oftentimes have observed. You look into the shelf, you grab a few solutions, and then we design something around that rather than doing it the other way around. So my provocative statement is, I think we should much, it always is derived somehow from the past, from some sort of old working model, from some old insights. Oftentimes it's worth to take a step back and think about something totally new that is fit for purpose that you define in that particular instance. So that's all what I to add on. Otherwise, agree to many statements that have been made.
Okay. Well, with limited time left, I would like us to just focus on what we do going forward from here to conquer this. And I guess I'm curious as to whether you think we are already on the right path, and incrementally we will indeed be able to make the progress we need to, or if we need a shift in direction. Do we need to make a little bit more effort on the technology side? Do we need to do something that I often advocate, which is a bit like what the car and the fashion industries do, and they produce these concepts, and we need to sort of almost show what good looks like or what the future could look like, because we are so poor at imagining it ourselves just from a bottom-up, a ground-up basis, and that's kind of what you were saying just a second ago, I think, Stefan. What is the way in which we can actually derive the benefits that we need to do here as quickly as possible? It's a very open question, and I'm going to ask the audience a poll question on a very similar subject at the same time.
I agree that in that context, we need to be able to have the proof of concept approach, right? So we need to be able to work IT and the business together. This is not the business saying, here's my requirements, and IT goes off and does something, comes back later on. And this is really, how do we iterate together to build, to fail, to make mistakes, to continue to change, and to move to a place where we actually have that vision of, what Deborah mentioned. How do we do that? And it requires working together, not just medical and commercial, but medical, commercial, and IT, right? It's like it's a triangle.
Thank you. You might see my poll is actually called the biggest benefit. So it's about what is the actual greatest significant long-term benefit of achieving this work? So, I feel like we've beaten everyone with a few sticks today, and I'm trying to get to the carrot is what I'm trying to do here. So, Deborah, Carsten, Stefan, anything more?
I think a couple of the themes that we've all sort of talked to around understanding, building a shared understanding and purpose of what we're really trying to solve. What is it that we're really trying to affect, and then the clarity of purpose that goes behind that for functions. I think, Stefan, and I'd love to hear more on this from you in terms of building that culture of transparency and openness. Again, I think it was some of what somebody put in the chat that Gen Z is not going to put up with this in terms of the openness by which we will need to operate, both from a cultural perspective as well. The other thing is that the final thing we probably haven't had time to talk to is around collaborating across boundaries. So we're very much focused on cross team, but this is cross organizational working as well, where partnership has to be inherent to our future business model in order to build some of the digital health and some more of the disruptive technology of the future that we know where this is going to move in order to address healthcare resilience.
From my perspective, just really quickly, Carsten, because you asked at least probably a few questions there. I think it, for me, comes down very much to the idea of how agile is the organization that I'm working in. And of course, big organizations, are not agile anymore. So how can we maintain a level of agility? I've worked in a startup which was super agile, and cross-functional collaboration was not an issue at all. Now I'm leading a mid-sized pharma with barely 2,500 employees, and it starts to get complicated already. But I think it's still manageable, at least from my viewpoint, and I have a very biased viewpoint. I know that. But then you come to organizations like yours or Deb's organization with close to 100,000 or anywhere between 50 to 100,000 employees, and it's getting even more complicated. So I think the challenge is probably, and I don't have the answer for that, how do we keep that agility from the startup mindset, that connectivity between people? And for me, it comes down connectivity between people. How do we keep that? I think that's a fundamental question, and not to be solved in the last minute of this fantastic webinar, really.
Come on, we can do anything in a minute. Sorry, Deb. And you'll see I've put a final next steps poll up as well. So
what's my last word?
Yes, exactly.
Three words. So I think what we're talking about here is people and culture. So curiosity, lean into the discerning voice and the opinion that is different to yours. And I think, Stefan, I love your shared company objectives, and I think you can achieve it in big organizations. So transparency of what's important, and alignment and understanding where you're pulling together and where you're pulling apart. I think those three things, I think you can change the world.
Embrace the weirdos. That's what I heard.
I think so. Yeah. Be with the person who's completely different to you. I think you'll move forwards a lot.
Evie, I think you've got the final word, and then we're out of time.
I agree 100%. Right. I mean, so yes, be bold. Test the existing, thinking, and the future is really, really in our hands. We can craft what we would like and how we would like it to look. So thank you.
Indeed. Well, thank you, panel. I know that many of you have got another meeting starting now. I will let you go. I do want to say a huge mega thank you to our panel for their energy and insights today. They've all been very kind, speaking to us and sharing for the benefit of our industry as opposed to just their own company. There you go, collaboration right there, everybody in action. And also, of course, all of you watching and listening in and commenting, really appreciated. I'm going to finish the webinar now, but I'll hold the window open in case you've got anything else to type, any other ideas or things to suggest as we go forward from here. Any wonderful comments about how incredible this experience was or how terrible it was. We're open to both. Thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate it. Special thanks to Evie and his Appian team, as I said at the beginning, for making today's session happen. Been great partners to work with. I wish you good luck with this and a great day. See you soon.